Cryptography, if you go back to World War II and you think of Turing and the Nazi Enigma, the war machine and everything that was going on, when they realized what they had unlocked at the end of the war, the US government and many other governments said, whoa, 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 this is a little much and it just can't be shared openly. Only state-level actors used cryptography at that point, and it wasn't cloak and dagger stuff. What the NSA would do is if you were doing cryptographic research, they just would pay you and say, publish with us and keep your findings internal, and you can't share this. It was also counted as a munition. It was counted as a bullet to make it illegal to actually work in the field. So there were no jobs in cryptography. There was no research going on in universities. This was a brand new field with little traction outside of what was happening at the state level. In the 1970s, a couple of guys taking a lot of LSD and themselves imagining what the future would look like when computers were online. One guy in particular, Whitfield Diffie, and another, his partner Martin Hellman at Stanford, realized that if computers were going to become ubiquitous in our lives, if we would have these computers everywhere, traditional encryption, traditional cryptography wouldn't work because you would have to physically bring someone this decryption key. So they wanted to build a system that avoided physically transmitting, mailing a key. And in brilliance of Whitfield Diffie, he imagined the system called public key cryptography. And they rushed to make this public so that it wasn't incorporated into any of the NSA's plans or any other state-level actor. And this really became the foundation of all cryptography that we use to build the internet. There was one caveat. It did not get deployed the way these people had intended. They had imagined people using these cryptographic keys themselves. But at the time in the 80s, they were saying, well, these people are going to be too stupid to manage it, so we're going to have to manage it for them. So cryptography really went from only being state-level actors, so military and governments, to being something that a company did for you in exchange for your dog's name or your mother's maiden name or any other authentication principle. They built something called public key infrastructure. So you would share with them your private information, and they would manage your cryptography for you. So when you go to this day on the internet, on the www, that corner of the internet, and you are typing in, on the HTTP, and you're on your bank, and you see that little lock come up. That's something called the secure sockets layer. That's running public key infrastructure for you. The problem with this is that all of the authentication information we shared has created a public health epidemic. And Christina just mentioned this, that, you've been hacked, all this data is out there. And people have made a market in this. And criminals are using, if you want to commit crimes these days, you use the internet. You do not physically go to rob someone. I mean, there's a couple people doing it, but it's not as widespread as what's going on the internet. What Bitcoin has done, and that's really one of the amazing things, it took cryptography from the state-level actor to a service provided on the side by a company, so a bank was going to keep doing its bank thing, but it was also going to do a bit of cryptography here. That wasn't good enough. Bitcoin made cryptographic keys down to the individual level. It brought them to the individual. So that's really part of the grand narrative, the editorial scope that we're trying to capture at CoinDesk. We're trying to chart this change, this recalibration and redeployment of cryptography from state level to a service provided by a company, and finally to Bitcoin, which is the widest deployment of public key cryptography in the history of the world, and it's not even close. So Bitcoin was able to do this not from being, the invention of Bitcoin itself wasn't new inventions inside of it. It was an orchestration, a very elegant solution, and a very elegant orchestration of really three technologies. Public key cryptography, which really brought the whole idea of consent down to the possession of a key. So when someone says in law, possession is 9/10 of the law, in Bitcoin it is 10/10 of the law. If you hold that key, you are who you say you are, and we don't need to know anything more about you, exactly like cash. So it really behaves in this way and mimics the way cash is a bearer instrument. So if you have cash and you put it on the table, that's all we need to know about you. And that was something Satoshi put in the white paper. Banks are weary of their customers because they have to ask for more information than they would otherwise require. And that goes as far as seeing Home Hardware or Home Depot, I'm not sure what you call it here in America. But, they just wanted to give you reward points. They want to sell you hammers and give you some reward points. But they had to gather all the same information that a bank would in order to create this infrastructure. So it's one of the weird things of cryptography. It's kind of an unfair fight If one person makes a mistake in the system, the whole thing is zero. It's not worth anything. So home hardware screwed up. The banks who are spending billions and billions and billions of dollars protecting your dog's name and your mother's maiden name and everything else you've shared with them in order for them to authenticate you is now useless because you've also shared it with somebody else. So the part of public key cryptography that's so important is that it is a bare instrument and it really mimics cash more than it does plastic, which is a pull transaction, which is going into your account and pulling information out. The other part is this P2P network, and that's really where a lot of the security comes from. So you can think of a tree falling in the forest as really where the security of Bitcoin comes, and I think Emmanuel did a great job explaining if one person has the answer and you all have to share the answer, you're able to vote on it. The other part is this computer software. So and that's really where Ethereum comes in with this great invention. It took the same calibration, the same deployment of technologies of Bitcoin, and added all of this computer business logic to it. And that really incentivized an entire network of people to start developing and putting new extensions into it. What we see with Bitcoin and the orchestration of invention, it's a lot like the bicycle. The pieces to it were not new. The pieces to the bicycle, the chain, the gears, the wheels, these all existed before, but the calibration and orchestration was magic. When the wheels first went and stayed up, it was a miracle. And other people started to copy this invention of the bicycle. And that's where we see these other blockchains coming into the market. Bitcoin was the first, but like a road bike and a mountain bike, you have other bespoke types of orchestrations out there that you can find. What we're really in the end betting on, and really where our narrative comes down in CoinDesk, is the following. If you look at this deployment of these keys, they show consent. They show that you mean to send Bitcoin to someone. They mean to spend a cryptocurrency on something. We have all of this business logic that can be attached to it, so the types of transactions can become extremely sophisticated. What ends up happening, and if you look at the actual word of the wallet, right? The wallets manage nothing but cryptographic keys. That's all these blockchains are in the end, are cryptographic keys that move memory. And this memory has value. So these cryptographic keys move memory. And in doing so, they show consent. And when you look at these wallets, they hold keys. They manage keys and they generate keys. That's all they do. There is no Bitcoin. It's the keys. The keys are being shared by people. When we think of the word currency, currency really meant useful in real time. A bar of gold was not useful in real time, so we created currency in order to have some utility, to have something that was useful to us. What we are suggesting at CoinDesk and what we are suggesting with anyone who is really down the rabbit hole in cryptocurrencies is that cryptographic keys themselves are becoming currency. And that's why the wallets that hold these cryptographic keys are so important. They're already hinting at that. They hold, manage, and store cryptographic keys that can be used for all manner of things. So when we look at these wallets, when you start considering the types of assets they hold, they're holding keys that can express your consent to a multitude of business agreements, of specific applications. So that really becomes the shift here. And that's really what we're trying to chart at CoinDesk, is the use of cryptographic keys by individuals on an individual level to express consent for various types of transactions. And that really is the shift that we think is so fundamental, because what it ends up doing is it recalibrates the entire deployment of cryptography on the internet. It recalibrates the entire way we can show that we agree with something, that we can make a secure relationship with another person in a digital world. And that's really what it comes down to, is the keys allow you to form and secure digital relationships with anyone, anywhere in the world. And that's different, because before you had to really rely on someone else to help you secure that digital relationship. You needed a third party. Now you can do it through the simple expression of a cryptographic key. And within all of that, what we have seen this year is that these cryptographic keys move memory. The memory itself, people thought of things that were digital as ephemeral, as not real. You've heard many of these people in New York City say that this year. It's not real, it's not real. I think that's the psychological hump that was overcome this year in 2017. that people have finally accepted that something that was natively digital could also be property, private property. And these cryptographic keys are able to express, move, and use digital property. And that's brand new. And so when people say, and it starts going around various public policies, we see the lever of monetary policy becoming less and less important, which was predicted in the Bitcoin white paper for various reasons in the first place. But as we see this lever start to evaporate, and we see Bitcoin behaving more and more like gold, surviving every day to continue and fight, we really see a change that means when people say, is Bitcoin a bubble? A lot of people in the cryptocurrency business say it's the pin, that everything else is the bubble, that fiat is the bubble, and that you have this uniquely empowering to the individual, this uniquely empowering tool of cryptography being used by individuals to blow away policies that we simply don't need anymore.